The city of Arcadia Prime gleamed under the light of its twin suns, a sprawling metropolis of steel and glass that stretched into the sky. Towering skyscrapers reflected the soft gold of the dawn, and the streets below buzzed with the usual mix of humans and aliens, their voices blending into a constant hum of life. Markets were filled with merchants selling exotic goods from distant star systems, while the skyways above carried shuttles and hovercars in an intricate ballet of movement. For most, life in the city was routine, predictable, and safe, or so it seemed. Eli Turner walked through the crowded streets, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. He was a quiet man, unremarkable in appearance with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Eli worked as a robotics engineer, and though his job was demanding, it was safe, predictable, and ordinary. He liked it that way. He preferred the hum of machinery to the chaos of large crowds, and he enjoyed solving problems in code and circuits, rather than dealing with people. Still, he couldn't ignore the rumors that had been spreading through the city for weeks. The stories about the Zur, a fearsome alien species that had emerged from the outer systems, led by a queen whose intelligence and cruelty were legendary. No one truly believed the rumors at first. Tales of entire fleets disappearing in seconds or planets being subdued without a single shot fired sounded more like myth than reality. Yet over the past month, more ships had gone silent. More colonies had failed to respond to messages, and the nervous whispers among the citizens had grown louder. Arcadia Prime, for all its confidence and defenses, now had an uneasy shadow hanging over it. Eli reached his workplace, a large, well-lit workshop tucked into a quieter district of the city. The walls were lined with mechanical parts, tools, and half-finished robots that blinked and whirred under the hands of their creator. He paused at the door, rubbing his temple. Something in the air felt different today. Heavier somehow, though he couldn't put his finger on why. A low vibration ran through the ground, subtle but unmistakable. Then the sky tore open. A massive shadow appeared above the city, blotting out the sunlight. People in the street stopped in their tracks, mouths opening in shock as they looked up. It was not a ship in the normal sense, it was a fleet, enormous and alien in design, sleek but menacing, moving as if guided by a single will. The ships descended with precision, their movements deliberate, almost hypnotic. Panic spread like wildfire. Vehicles swerved, people ran, and alien merchants abandoned their stalls, leaving goods scattered across the cobblestone streets. Eli froze, his mind racing. He had read about the Zur ships, but seeing them in person was something else entirely. The largest of the ships hovered directly above the city's center, a dark and shimmering structure that seemed alive, pulsating as if it had a heartbeat of its own. And then, as if sensing the fear below, a voice echoed through the city. Not through speakers, not through any normal communication device, but directly inside the minds of those who were listening. "I am the Queen," the voice said. It was calm, commanding, and terrifying. "Your defenses are nothing. Your leaders are weak. You will surrender or you will perish." Eli's stomach turned. Around him, people screamed, some collapsing to the ground in terror. Security forces scrambled, sending automated drones into the sky, but the drones were obliterated instantly. Explosions lit up the streets as Zur machines touched down, moving like shadows with bladed limbs and glowing eyes. Every attempt at resistance failed before it even began. In the control room of Arcadia Prime's central defense hub, alarms blared as commanders shouted orders. The city's main fleet was scrambled, hundreds of ships racing to intercept the Zur invaders. Eli, standing outside the chaos, could see them streaking into the sky, firing lasers and missiles. For a moment, hope flickered in the hearts of the citizens, but it was short-lived. The Queen's ship released a pulse of energy, a wave that swept across the fleet. Communications cut out, shields collapsed, and one by one, the human ships were torn apart or forced into retreat. Eli ducked behind a market stall as a blast tore through the street in front of him. The air smelled of burnt metal and ozone. People were screaming, running in all directions, but he stayed low, trying to make sense of what he could do. He had no weapons, no army, no plan, but he had his mind, and he had always been quick to notice patterns others missed. The Queen stepped down from her ship, towering above the tallest buildings. She was unlike any alien Eli had imagined. Her body a blend of exoskeleton and living tissue, her limbs long and elegant, her head adorned with a crown-like structure that pulsed with energy. But it was her eyes that struck fear into the hearts of all who saw her. eyes that seemed to see into the soul, reading thoughts and intentions with terrifying clarity. She raised a hand, and the bioengineered soldiers at her command froze. With a gesture, she sent them forward, a wave of deadly precision. Humans fought back valiantly, but the Queen anticipated every move. She was faster, stronger, smarter, and she adapted to every tactic almost instantly. Any human resistance seemed futile. Eli pressed himself against the stall, heart pounding. Around him, he saw people he knew, neighbors and co-workers trying desperately to fight back or escape. A group of security officers was pinned down, their weapons useless against the alien soldiers. A young girl clutched a stuffed toy, her wide eyes filled with terror. Eli's instinct to run battled with a strange pull. Something inside him told him not to hide. Not yet. The Queen's voice rang out again, this time colder, sharper. You cannot win. Your leaders are incompetent. Surrender now and I may spare some of you. A commander, barely alive, shouted back, We will never surrender. The Queen tilted her head. For a brief, almost imperceptible moment, she hesitated. Her eyes scanned the crowd, lingering on the humans below, calculating, analyzing. Eli noticed the hesitation and felt a spark of something unfamiliar. Hope. In the midst of chaos, small acts of bravery began to emerge. Civilians blocked doorways to protect the wounded. Engineers diverted power to create temporary barriers. Pilots who had survived the fleet's destruction maneuvered their damaged ships to shield civilians from the Queen's attacks. Though it was not enough to turn the tide, it was enough to show that humanity was not entirely helpless. Eli's mind raced. He had seen her patterns, the way she moved, the way she deployed her soldiers, the small moments of pause when she calculated her next strike. If anyone could find a weakness, it would be someone who stayed observant, someone ordinary. He pressed himself against the wall and watched, learning, memorizing, thinking. The battle raged through the day. The city was scarred with craters, fires, and destruction. Smoke filled the air, blending with the sharp scent of burnt ozone. Yet through the chaos, Eli continued to observe, noting the Queen's tendencies, the small errors she made when overconfident, the slight delay before she adapted to unexpected obstacles. It was dangerous work. If she noticed him, she could end his life in an instant, but Eli could not look away. As night fell, the city seemed on the edge of collapse. Most of the fleet had been destroyed. The streets were littered with debris, injured citizens, and alien soldiers. And yet, in one hidden corner of the city, Eli huddled with a small group of survivors, whispering urgently. She's not perfect, he said. I've seen her hesitate. I've seen her make small mistakes. We can't fight her head-on, but we can survive. We can learn, and maybe we can find a way to turn the tide. The survivors looked at him, doubt and fear etched on their faces, but something in Eli's tone, a quiet certainty, kept them listening. They were tired, scared, and on the verge of despair, but his words sparked a tiny flame of determination. Far above, the Queen surveyed the city. Her eyes scanned the remaining humans, her mind calculating, her presence dominating. She believed victory was inevitable, that the humans were nothing more than insects to be crushed. Yet even she did not notice the quiet observer among the crowd, the unremarkable human who watched and waited, learning and thinking. Eli knew the fight was far from over. The Queen had nearly destroyed everything, and the city was broken. But he also knew something no one else seemed to realize. The battle was not just about weapons or fleets. It was about strategy, adaptability, and courage. Humanity had survived worse. Humanity had risen before, and maybe, just maybe, humanity could rise again. As the night deepened and fires burned across the ruined streets, Eli slipped away from the group, moving through alleys and debris. He needed to understand her fully, to prepare, to find the moment when one action, one small, calculated strike, could change everything. In the distance, the Queen's ship hovered, a dark silhouette against the stars. She believed she had won. She believed the humans were finished, and yet in the crowd below, one quiet human did not surrender to fear. He watched, he waited, and he planned. The first day of the invasion ended in devastation, but for Eli Turner it was only the beginning. The Queen had underestimated humanity, as she always did, and in that underestimation lay the smallest, brightest spark of hope, a spark that could grow into something unstoppable. The morning after the attack was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Arcadia Prime lay in ruins, its streets scarred by fire and debris, its buildings battered and smoking. The once bustling city had become a ghost of itself, with only a few brave or desperate humans moving through the wreckage. Yet amid the devastation, a strange sense of determination began to emerge. People were scared, but fear had not yet crushed them entirely. Eli Turner moved carefully through a narrow alley, avoiding the main streets where Zir patrols still scoured for survivors. He carried a small pack with tools, wires, and a compact device of his own design. His mind raced as he pieced together everything he had observed the previous day. The Queen was powerful, yes, nearly unstoppable, but she was not flawless. She reacted in patterns. She hesitated, even if only for fractions of a second, when faced with something unexpected, and that tiny hesitation could be exploited. Eli's first priority was survival, but his second was observation. He needed to learn everything about the Queen's movements, her strategies, and her soldiers. In the quiet of the ruined streets, he began watching. He saw patrols move with a chilling efficiency, their glowing eyes scanning for life. He noticed how the Queen's soldiers communicated, how a simple gesture or signal would direct their attacks. He studied their weapons, their patterns, their weaknesses. Soon, Eli realized he could not do this alone. He needed others who were willing to think, to observe, to act, not just fight blindly. He found a small group of survivors huddled in the remains of a collapsed building. A former security officer named Marla, an engineer called Joran, and a medic. Lynn, they were wary at first, exhausted and afraid. But Eli spoke calmly, logically, pointing out the patterns he had discovered. "She's smart, but she's predictable in her own way," Eli said. "Every time she strikes, she does it with rhythm. There are moments when she pauses, moments when her soldiers hesitate. We can't fight her head on, but we can survive and learn. And if we survive and learn, we might find a way to fight back." Marla shook her head. "You expect us to hide and watch while she kills everyone we know? That's not surviving, that's waiting to die." Eli met her gaze steadily. "No, that's preparing to win. We've already seen what happens if we rush her. Every fleet, every squad, every attempt has failed. But the Queen is not perfect. She never is. I've seen the flaws, even if they're small, and small flaws can be enough." Reluctantly, the group agreed to follow his lead. Their first step was reconnaissance. Under the cover of smoke and the ruins, they moved through the city, mapping patrols, noting weak points in the alien soldiers' formations, and identifying areas that could be used for ambushes. Every street, every building became a potential tool, a trap or a shield. It was during one of these reconnaissance missions that Eli noticed something remarkable. The Queen had a central ship hovering above the city, a dark silhouette that seemed to pulse with energy. From that ship, she coordinated her soldiers, issuing commands faster than any human could perceive. Yet even from his hiding spot, Eli observed a pattern. Every few minutes, the Queen's gaze seemed to shift, scanning not just her soldiers but the humans below. There was a rhythm to it, a cycle, and that cycle could be predicted. By midday, Eli had devised a plan, a small experimental strike to test his theory. He had a device that he had designed months before, originally intended to disrupt faulty robotics. It was compact, portable, and adaptable, but never tested on living beings. The idea seemed dangerous, almost impossible, but desperate times called for desperate measures. He believed that if he could direct its energy in a precise way, it might interfere with the Queen's psychic control over her soldiers, causing confusion, hesitation, or even momentary weakness. "Are you sure this will work?" Lynn asked nervously, adjusting her medkit. Eli shook his head. "I can't be sure, but I know this: doing nothing will get us all killed. We need to act, even if it's dangerous. If I'm right, it's our first real chance to push back." They moved carefully toward a smaller Zir outpost on the outskirts of the city. The outpost was a brutal construction of black metal and organic material, bristling with alien technology and soldiers. Every step was tense. Any mistake could be fatal. Using the shadows, the team navigated through the ruins, bypassing patrols and security drones. When they reached a vantage point overlooking the outpost, Eli activated the device. A soft hum filled the air, barely noticeable, but its effect was immediate. The Zir soldiers began to hesitate, their movements stuttering, their coordination faltering. It was brief, only a few seconds, but it was enough. Using the distraction, Marla and Joran neutralized key defenses while Lynn helped any trapped humans escape. For the first time, Eli felt a surge of hope. The Queen had near-complete control over her forces, but even her power had limits. One clever, unexpected action could create ripples, small openings that could be exploited. The team returned to their temporary safe house as dusk fell, exhausted but alive. Word of the small victory spread among other survivors. Whispers of human ingenuity and courage began to circulate. Humans were not entirely powerless. Some who had hidden for days ventured out to help, inspired by the idea that the Queen was not invincible. Eli knew this was only the beginning. They could not win by hiding forever. Each day, each observation, each small victory would bring them closer to understanding the Queen's weaknesses. They needed coordination, communication, and courage, but most of all, they needed to believe that they could matter, that even ordinary humans could make a difference. Over the next few days, Eli's team continued their work, moving from one ruined district to another, gathering information, helping survivors, and testing small calculated strikes against the Zir forces. They discovered patterns in the Queen's psychic control, small gaps in her attention, and moments when her soldiers acted independently, confused or hesitant. Every discovery was another piece of the puzzle. Eli also began to notice changes among the human survivors. Civilians who had once been paralyzed by fear began to act with purpose. Engineers improvised weapons and defensive tools. Pilots repaired damaged ships and used them for daring, low-risk sorties. Even children learned to navigate the ruined streets with stealth, bringing food and supplies to those in hiding. The Queen's overwhelming presence did not crush humanity's spirit. It only highlighted it. One evening, Eli climbed to the roof of a partially destroyed skyscraper overlooking the city. Fires burned in the distance, and the faint glow of alien patrols moved like shadows below. Yet despite the destruction, he saw signs of life, movement, and determination. He realized that the battle was no longer just about survival. It was about strategy, creativity, and the human will to endure. He pulled out a small holo projector, displaying a map of the city and the known positions of Zir patrols. He traced patterns, connecting moments of hesitation to potential strikes, imagining scenarios where humans could exploit small openings to save lives and push back the enemy. The plan was fragile, risky, and uncertain, but it was something no one had done before. Humans were not waiting to be crushed. They were learning, adapting, and preparing to fight back in ways the Queen had not anticipated. As Eli worked, a sudden vibration ran through the building. He froze. From a distance, he saw the Queen's main ship hovering closer, her presence almost palpable. She had noticed the minor disruptions, the failed patrols, the small strikes. She was adapting, analyzing, and preparing her response. Her soldiers moved with renewed precision, scanning the streets and rooftops for any sign of resistance. Eli's heart raced. The Queen was still stronger, faster, smarter, and more terrifying than anything humanity had faced. Yet he felt no fear, not the paralyzing fear that had gripped the city before. Instead, he felt determination. The Queen had underestimated them. She had underestimated humans before, and she would do it again. Every calculation, every pattern, every small act of courage was a challenge she had not foreseen. That night, as the city settled into an uneasy silence, Eli returned to the safe house. His team was gathered, exhausted but alert. They reviewed their observations, their successes, and their failures. Every detail mattered. Every moment of hesitation the Queen had shown, every flaw in her control over her soldiers was logged and analyzed. Marla looked at Eli, her expression a mix of doubt and admiration. "You really believe we can beat her?" she asked quietly. Eli met her gaze firmly. "I don't know if we can win yet, but I know this, we can make a difference. Every time we act, every time we fight smart, we change the balance, even if only a little. And little changes can grow into something bigger. The Queen may think she is unstoppable, but she has." Outside, the city remained under siege, the fires of destruction mingling with the faint glimmers of hope. Humans had survived the first blow, learned from it, and begun to act with intelligence and courage. And somewhere in the crowd, ordinary people were beginning to realize that even in the face of a nearly invincible enemy, their actions mattered. Eli Turner had seen the Queen's power. He had seen her nearly crush humanity in a single day, but he had also seen a spark of something extraordinary, the spark of human determination, adaptability, and ingenuity. And he knew that the battle was far from over. The Queen might control fleets and armies, but she did. The city of Arcadia Prime was on the brink of collapse. Fires still burned across the streets. smoke rising in thick columns that darkened the sky. The once proud towers now lay in ruins, their skeletal frames silhouetted against the stars. Zaire soldiers patrolled with relentless precision, sweeping the streets for any sign of human resistance. From above, the Queen's ship hovered like a dark predator, her presence dominating the city as if it were already hers. Eli Turner stood on a rooftop, surveying the chaos below. He had spent weeks studying the Queen's movements, observing her soldiers, and refining his device. It had taken careful calculation, countless trials, and more courage than he thought he possessed, but he now had a plan. The Queen's psychic control was powerful, but it was not perfect. There were moments, tiny, fleeting moments, when her concentration wavered. That was all Eli needed. One precise strike could create confusion among her forces, giving humans a chance to fight back. He glanced at his team. Marla, Joran, and Lynn, all tense but ready. Other survivors were joining in, bringing with them makeshift weapons, repaired hovercraft, and a willingness to act. It was not an army. It was something smaller, less organized, and perhaps more desperate, but it was human. And humans were unpredictable, Eli whispered the plan. We wait until she focuses on her main attack. Then we activate the device. It will disrupt her control just for a moment. That moment is all we need. That's when everyone strikes. Marla swallowed hard. And if it doesn't work? Eli shook his head. Then we survive another day and try again. But it will work. It has to. They moved into position. The Queen's forces advanced, sweeping through the city with calculated brutality. Humans ducked into ruins, fired from hidden positions, and led small counterattacks. But it was like swatting at a storm. The Queen's soldiers adapted quickly, neutralizing every effort that was uncoordinated. Still, Eli and his team observed and adjusted, using every small victory to guide their next move. The decisive moment came as the Queen began her assault on the city's central plaza, intending to crush the largest concentration of human survivors at once. Her soldiers moved like living shadows, striking down anything that resisted. Civilians screamed, buildings crumbled, and the sound of blaster fire mixed with the roar of collapsing metal. Eli signaled his team. They slipped through alleys and rubble, carrying the device to a vantage point that overlooked the plaza. He activated the hum, the soft vibration barely perceptible to anyone nearby. Then he waited. Above, the Queen raised her hand, issuing commands with precise gestures. Her psychic control rippled through her soldiers, guiding them with terrifying efficiency. And then it happened, the moment Eli had been waiting for. She hesitated just slightly, her attention drawn to a human ship maneuvering unexpectedly. Eli pressed the final button. A pulse of energy shot from the device, spreading invisibly through the air. Zir soldiers froze mid-step, their coordination collapsing. Some stumbled, some turned on each other in confusion, and some simply stopped, blank-eyed and uncertain. It lasted only seconds, but it was enough. Marla and Joran led the first charge, striking at the confused soldiers with makeshift weapons and salvaged energy rifles. Lynn helped civilians escape, guiding them through hidden passages while covering their retreat with carefully aimed shots. The plaza erupted into chaos, but this time it was human chaos, focused, coordinated, and fearless. Civilians joined in where they could, throwing debris, triggering explosives, and using every tool at their disposal. Pilots swooped in with repaired ships, diving through the plaza to disrupt remaining patrols. Even children acted, moving supplies, setting up barriers, and helping the wounded reach safety. Every action mattered. Every action shifted the balance. The Queen realized what was happening. Her eyes widened in surprise, her psychic control faltering as the pulse disrupted her link with the soldiers. She tried to adjust to regain order, but it was too late. Humans, ordinary humans, had taken advantage of the tiniest opening and transformed it into something unstoppable. Eli focused on the Queen, watching her movements. She was still dangerous, still faster and stronger than any human could be, but she was not infallible. Her arrogance had been her weakness. She had assumed humanity would remain passive, that fear would paralyze them. She had not expected humans to observe, to adapt, to act with intelligence and courage. He saw his moment. The Queen had raised her hand to issue another command, and for a heartbeat she was vulnerable. Eli fired the device directly at her ship, directing its energy with careful precision. A surge of interference ran through the Queen's mind and the link to her soldiers. Her psychic control shattered, even if briefly, and her bioengineered soldiers froze or faltered completely. Chaos spread through the ranks of her army. Without their coordination, they became easy targets for humans who had prepared and waited. Pilots swooped in, engineers rigged explosives, and civilians guided attacks from hidden positions. Every small act compounded the disruption, and the Queen realized too late that she had underestimated the humans. Eli didn't wait to see the full outcome. He moved through the plaza, leading survivors and directing them strategically. His voice carried over the shouts and explosions, calm but commanding. Now strike together, aim for their weak points. Do not let them regroup. Humans surged forward. They were not an army in the traditional sense, but their unpredictability, intelligence, and courage made them more dangerous than any weapon the Queen had anticipated. Soldiers who had seemed unstoppable fell, trapped by clever maneuvers and improvised devices. The Queen's attention was split, her control broken, and the tide had shifted. For a moment, the Queen seemed almost uncertain. Her eyes scanned the battlefield, trying to adapt. But humans had already learned from observation and experimentation. They had learned how to exploit her every hesitation, her every small error, and that was enough. The climax came in a flurry of motion. Eli and his team coordinated with every human still able to fight. They struck at the Queen's remaining soldiers, disrupted her communications, and guided survivors in a final, desperate push. The Queen, overwhelmed and unable to regain control, finally retreated to her ship. She rose into the sky, leaving the city in relative silence, her army faltering behind her. Humans did not celebrate immediately. The city was still in ruins, the casualties high, and the threat remained. But the impossible had been achieved. The Queen had been forced to withdraw. Humanity had survived, and more than that, they had proved themselves capable of outsmarting an enemy who had seemed unbeatable. Eli stood among the survivors, exhausted and covered in dust, smoke, and sweat. He looked at the faces around him, faces filled with fear, hope, exhaustion, and relief. They had witnessed what they could achieve when they combined intelligence, courage, and determination. They had learned that even ordinary humans could tip the scales. A young boy ran up to him holding a broken toy that had survived the battle. "You did it," the boy said simply, his wide eyes filled with awe. Eli knelt and smiled, a small, tired smile. "No," he said softly. "We did it. All of us." Above, the Queen's ship disappeared into the distance, her retreat a silent acknowledgement that she had underestimated humanity. She had faced a species that refused to yield, that adapted, observed, and acted with courage beyond expectation. She had learned a lesson she would not forget. Humans, even when appearing small and weak, could rise to extraordinary heights. In the days that followed, the survivors began to rebuild. They repaired streets, tended to the wounded, and salvaged what they could from the destruction. The city would never be the same, but the spirit of its people had been strengthened, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by courage. Eli continued his work, refining his device, observing the Queen from afar, and preparing for the possibility of her return. He knew the battle was not truly over, but he also knew that humans had proven something vital. Intelligence, creativity, and courage could overcome even the most powerful threats. And as long as humans remained vigilant, adaptable, and united, they could rise again, stronger, smarter, and unbroken. For the first time in generations, the citizens of Arcadia Prime felt a renewed sense of hope. They had faced the impossible, and though the scars of the battle remained, they had discovered a power within themselves that could not be taken away. And somewhere in the crowd, as Eli observed the city and its people, he realized that the smallest spark, one human among millions, could shift the balance of an entire galaxy. The Queen had nearly won, but humanity had risen. And that rise was only the beginning.